And I would say maybe one thing you need to do is just step back and take a moment to unpack a little bit. Sometimes, if you're going on a hike and you keep putting stuff in your bag, eventually it really does start to weigh you down and not serve you well.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to Truth Works, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change. I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. Welcome, Patrick Leddin, to Truth Works. Hey guys, it's another episode. I'm Jessica Neal. Your host, Patty McCord, is out, but good news, she's going to be coming back soon, so stay tuned. Today, as you just heard, I have a wonderful person on the show today. His name is Patrick Leddin. And Patrick, you have such an interesting background, which I'm going to let you tell everybody about. But you've been at leadership at like all these different altitudes. You were in the Army, you've been in Fortune 500, like now you're an author. So I want you to tell the whole story, but everybody, you probably have read his first book. And if not, you're going to read his first and his second. His first book was super successful, and this next book, which he's going to tell us all about, and if you are looking online, you can see it behind him. It's Disrupt Everything. Patrick, tell us a little bit first before we get into the books, but tell us a little bit about your story. How did this all happen? How did it take place? We want to know everything.
All right, everything. Well, first of all, Jessica, thanks so much for having me. And Patty, my thoughts are with you as you recover. But looking forward to seeing you back on this podcast soon. I was telling Jessica before we started, I love listening to the podcast. I listened to it this morning to really get a feel for this. And I'm like, all right, this is one that I've signed up for going forward. So I'm really honored to be on the show today. As far as my background goes, I would break it down into saying from age 17 till around 29, I did the Army thing. So I was an Army Airborne Ranger, which meant I jumped.
Also, thank you for your service.
Thanks. Thanks. So that meant I jumped out of planes and ran around the woods and got to lead people, which was an interesting experience, right? To be 20 years old.
I have a question. Did you pick jumping out of planes, or was that handed to you?
No, I picked it. So when I was 17, I enlisted in the National Guard. It was a way to go to college. And then when I was in college, I joined ROTC. And one summer, I was given the opportunity to go to airborne school at 19, which was interesting. And then years later, when I went to infantry school, I was actually supposed to go to another post placed in Colorado, which sounded really fun, like get to go to Colorado. And my wife, I had just gotten married. My wife and I were excited. We're like 23 years old. And one day they came out and they said, we are short lieutenants. We don't have enough lieutenants at Fort Drum and Fort Bragg. Okay. And my brother-in-law had been assigned to Fort Drum. And Fort Drum, if you don't know, it's in upstate New York. It's pretty brutal weather up there, and there's not a lot around to do. And I remember him saying we would have whiteouts where they would cancel physical training in the morning because there's too much snow. And I'm like, I grew up in Chicago. I'm done with the snow thing for a while. So I raised my hand and I said, I'll go jump out of planes more. That's fine at Fort Bragg. My wife learned that years later. She's like, that's how we ended up at Fort Bragg. I'm like, yeah. So I did that for a while. I was a platoon leader, and I stayed at Fort Bragg for a long time. I was a company commander in the 82nd as well, 82nd Airborne Division. And then when I hit 29, our second child was just born, and I kind of felt like so many people had told me that hang on to these moments. These are the best moments as a person in the Army, when you're leading a platoon and you're leading a company. After that, it's a lot of staff work, and occasionally you might get another leadership role. And what I mean by staff work is like office work, sitting in a cubicle, managing something for the other leaders. And I thought, I just don't want to be that person right now. I felt at 29, I had something else I'd rather do. So I decided to disrupt myself, and to steal a word. And I left the Army and I went to KPMG Consulting. And the main reason I went there is a friend of mine had gone there, and he said, hey, we're looking to hire some people. And I said, what do you do? And they said, we make PowerPoint slides and we build Excel spreadsheets and we wear suits. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So I went to, right, two things that we don't really do anymore, right? AI does it for us. Yeah.
Nobody wears suits.
Yeah. We don't wear suits and we don't do PowerPoint slides and we don't build them ourselves anymore. So it's interesting. So I pivoted to that and I did it for a few years. I ran my project took off, which was crazy. When I first got there at KPMG, I was the second person on the team of two. And we were subordinate to another company that the client had hired. And you fast forward less than a year later, and I'm in charge of a project now. I have 39 people. The primary consulting firm is gone. My partner had moved on to something else. And I'm like, wow, I got 39 people. And then the project grew to millions and millions of dollars. I had an opportunity to start something on the side, and I started to do it. And all of a sudden I had two jobs. We call it a hustle now, right? A side hustle.
Yeah,
back then we said moonlighting. Like this is 2000.
That was the thing.
I was moonlighting, doing my own work and at some point I was like, I work all day, and then my wife and I work together until 2:00 in the morning. So I decided to tell KPMG I'm going to leave. So I left KPMG and I started this business, ran it for the next 12 years. And then I was out of the country doing some work for a client, and I was gone for 3 months. So my wife and myself and our son, the one who was born at Fort Bragg, is now at the time in 8th grade. And we go overseas for 3 months. And we come back from that trip, and a former colleague of mine said, wait a minute, you've been gone for 3 months? I'm like, yeah. He goes, your clients haven't quit? I said, no, they're still paying their invoices. And your employees haven't quit? No, they're still coming to work. And this guy said, you should talk to my boss. And I said, why? He said, because they're looking to acquire a company. This is somebody who came out of Deloitte Consulting, and they bought our business. And then I was like, okay, I'm 42 years old. So I've done Army for 10 years. I ran a business for 12 years. And along the way, I picked up a doctorate at the University of Kentucky. And I decided,
Go Cats.
Go Cats. And I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go on the education route. So I got a job at Vanderbilt. And then the last almost 12 years, I was a professor at Vanderbilt, and I ran undergraduate business. So now I pivoted again to double down on this book project.
Yeah, you've done, I mean, what a career. I think, and maybe it's the part of you that likes to jump out of planes, but you're not afraid of change, which I think so many people are.
I don't know. Somewhere along the way, and I was probably, when I was younger, when I was a kid, I was kind of the shy, quiet person and just observed a lot of people. And I've gotten pretty good at observing people, like trying to figure out, I think I have a sixth sense. If I'm in a room, I kind of know where the ball is going in a meeting or something like that. I can kind of get out in front. It's not unique specifically to me, but I think it's a skill that I've built along the way. And the same thing in career, I kind of see where things are going a little bit. And I've just decided, right, wrong, good, bad, or indifferent, that I just want to be in the driver's seat of my own career. And I don't want to put myself in a situation where I am being dictated to what's going to happen. I would just rather be in a seat, whether it's in a company and I have the voice in the company, or I'm running my own thing and I kind of make the decisions, good or bad, with not on my own, but with lots of people informing me. I just kind of want to put myself in the position where I'm not subject to the way the winds are going to shift and I just get caught.
I don't disagree. I like being in that situation myself. So you become a professor, you write your first book. It's the 5-week leadership challenge. And now you're
I wrote a couple other books before that sold dozens.
Okay.
Self-published things, something for another company. So, but.
So you've written before, you just, yeah.
My point being is it was a couple self-published things. Then I wrote something for a company. Then I wrote the 5-week leadership challenge. So it was one of those, you learn along the way, put it that way.
Yeah, of course. And now you have the new book, which is Disrupt Everything and Win, which I love. And so we're going to talk about that. But what led you to, because you've had all this experience from the Army to KPMG to having your own company. Now you're a professor. So you have a lot of, insights and observations around leadership. But what led you to write the books? And do you like being a professor?
Well, actually, I gave up my professorship.
You did? Okay.
I did, yeah, which was it's another bet, I guess. But okay. I went to my dean last year when it was clear this book was going to happen. Okay. And I've been doing the research on it for a while. And I just thought, if I put this book out, I know what it takes to put a book out, especially like the last one I did on my own. That's kind of tough. And I know what it takes to do it. You got to go to bed every night thinking about it and get up every morning thinking about it. And I just went to my dean and I said, if I'm doing that, I'm not going to serve my students well.
Right.
And they were really kind. They said, well, we'll put you on a leave of absence. And I knew going into that the idea of you quit a professorship at a school like Vanderbilt, good luck getting back in, because thing because there's 10,000 people who would love to have that job, and it's a great job. But I also felt that if I'm going to tell people that they need to be open to disruption, whatever that means, look like I need to model it a bit myself. So yeah, I love teaching at the university. It was a great experience. But what happened was, Jessica, I was teaching a class. It came from COVID.
Okay.
When COVID hit, the school was scrambling like every other organization. And one thing that they didn't typically do is teach anything online. Undergraduates never took classes online. And our classes were pretty small. I mean, everything's under 25 students or so. So they put out a call, the chancellor's office did, saying, we need professors who are willing to teach a class online up to 100 people. Submit your proposal. And to me, those are moments where it's like, all right, thing in the back of my head that I've been playing with, I'm going to do it. So I wrote a proposal. I said, I'd like to teach a class called Leading Business Through Times of Crisis. As you might imagine, timing was perfect for that. So it went right through the approval process. And quickly, I was teaching this class. And at the same time, unbeknownst to me, or around the same time, there was this guy named Michael Ainsley who had once been the CEO of Sotheby's, the auction house. Yeah. He had also been on the board of Lehman Brothers when it collapsed, and talk about dealing with disruption. And he had taught a class. He was a guest speaker at a class at Brown University. And that class was about leading through adversity. Very similar topic. He also is on the board of trust at Vanderbilt. So you know how these things work, right? People talk to each other at that level. And he comes to the chancellor from a different angle and he says, boy, I saw this class that I taught in at Brown. We should have this class at Vanderbilt. And it was like you ever see the Plinko game when somebody drops there's this game for people who don't know, there's a game on Price is Right, a game show. And you earn these little chips and you can climb up to the top of this thing and you drop the chips through and they kind of bounce down this little board among the pegs and land in zones at the bottom that give you money. And anywhere from like 0 to a lot, I guess. And it felt like a Plinko game. He said this to the chancellor and they dropped this thing in there and it went ding, 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 ding. And it landed going, wait, this guy named Patrick teaches a class on leading business through crisis. Why don't you just partner with him? So I'd already had the class going. Now all of a sudden this guy comes along and he says he wants to partner. And we decided to do one section a semester. So if you teach 3 classes, one of the sections are with him and they're very guest speaker intensive. So it was really pretty cool. I mean, imagine if you're a college student, you're sitting in, or a student anyway, you're sitting in a room with 25 other people, students, and in walks, Doug Parker, who is the CEO of American Airlines, walks in, along with Sarah Nelson, who's the president of the Flight Attendants Association. And together they talk about how labor and management work through challenging times. Like really interesting things like that.
Really, yeah.
And then one day on the schedule was a guy named James Patterson. Who I knew the name. I'm sure most people are familiar with the name. And whether you read his books or not, he's just out there all the time in the world. Or if you walk in a bookstore, you'll see his name everywhere.
You will.
So he's on the list and he joins the class. It's kind of funny. He starts off and he looks at the students. He says, hi, I'm Stephen King, which is a great opening line. I think half the room was like, wait a minute, I thought Professor Leddin said James Patterson was coming. So he says, hi, I'm Stephen King, which has got a little laugh. And then he asked them this question. He said, are you living a good life? And he said, it's a simple question, but the answer isn't simple. It's not simplistic. He goes, or do you feel like you're on one treadmill right now, and then you'll get on another treadmill, and you'll get on another treadmill, and another treadmill, and then that'll be your life. And it hit the students hard. It hit me hard as he asked the question. And he said, I'm going to share with you how I went about living my good life. And he first started talking about, he went to Vanderbilt. He got his master's in English literature. He was trying to get a job in advertising, but he'd never worked in advertising or never took a class in advertising or marketing before. And he had to get creative about how to do that. So he put in came with a portfolio 1 week, which is common. And then he came back with another one the second week, which is not common. And then again, the third week. And then the fourth week, they hired him. And then he got in there and he became the youngest creative director at J. Walter Thompson. He became the CEO of J. Walter Thompson Ad Agency, the largest firm at the time. He was also the president over Hill & Knowlton, the big PR firm, because that was part of the group. And then one day he disrupted that. And he left it all from CEO of the company to be a writer. Yeah. And then he disrupted writing by writing with multiple authors like Bill Clinton or Dolly Parton or Mike Lupica or might I say Patrick Leddin. And he did all these things and he did so much. I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And he did a good job with the students, like setting his ego aside and just talking about life and wanting to have a good life. By the time it was over, I was doing a podcast at the time. I said, I'd love to have him on my podcast. And he did the podcast and we finished that up. And then after the podcast was over, when we were just chatting at the end, after you stop recording, he said, I like that. That was a nice conversation. It's fun to talk a little bit more than 2 minutes. So then I was like, okay, now I'm going to really go for it. So I wrote him a note The worst sales pitch you could ever send someone. I write them a note and say, I like you, you like me, let's write a book together. And yeah, it was basically that. I mean, if I still had it, I would.
I think that's bad at all.
He didn't answer. He didn't answer the note. So then I was like, all right, I got to get a little bit more creative. So I came back with an argument on more of a business argument about why this made sense and what the opportunity was and what I've done before and what I know and blah, blah, blah. And I got a call saying they give me 15 minutes. Oh. And that 15-minute call immediately started with him saying, I know we had 15 minutes, but let's just do the book. So I was like, okay, what does that mean? Let's do the book, right? So we went through that. It was a dance for about the next 9 months of trying to get the outline right and figure out what we want to do. And it required me to go to the university and ask them if they'd sponsor a research team so I could do it well. So we ended up putting together, I think, the biggest research project studying how do people deal with disruptions in their lives. And you know what I mean, like the curveballs, the medical diagnosis you didn't expect, the conversation around the family dinner table, the opportunity for a great promotion, good, bad, everything, the stuff that stops you in your tracks, AI, economic shifts, tariffs, all these type of things, big, small, unique, ubiquitous. What do they do in those moments that actually approach it from a positive approach and also come out with some really cool outputs? So that was kind of what we were trying to frame and figure out. We studied it. We had a chance to interview. I sat down and interviewed 350 people, which some people might be like, well, that's not very many. I'm telling you, as a qualitative research, 350 is a lot. That's a lot of scheduling, a lot of long form interviews. Everyone's an hour or plus.
Okay.
A lot of reading through transcripts and coding and trying to figure this out. But I think we came out with a really interesting book, and there was a qualitative piece to it where we did thousands of surveys, but those were more to refine points, to come out with, I think, a really engaging book, a story about different people's stories and how they dealt with disruption in their lives. And it isn't a one size fits all in regards to like, you need to read this thing from A to Z because every point's going to be important to you. It might be, but there are some where it's like, hey, I got that. Well, then good, move on to the next one. There's probably something in here that can be really helpful to you. And that's the feedback we're getting. People are really enjoying it. It hit the New York Times bestseller list this week. So I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah. So that's the long story for everybody.
So fun. I love the boldness that you had to just email. I really like the first email a lot.
I did too. I thought it would land.
I like you. You like me.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you if you want to know me behind the scenes more, there was a moment where it was like, this is not going anywhere. I did 2 outlines and he just didn't like either one. And he gives great feedback. But when somebody like him tells you to write a book that feels like no other book, what does that mean? I mean, the first outline missed, so he said, write something like no other book. So the second outline, I wrote the darkest, no hope outline you've ever seen. I mean, good luck reading this book and life's against you. I was trying to just go another direction with this thing to see what would hit. And he didn't like that one either. So then I was like, okay, I got 2 strikes. And his feedback was great. It was right spot on. He's a great partner. But I had 2 strikes. I was like, all right, I got to figure something out. So I went right to the chancellor at Vanderbilt, which is our president. It's the highest person at the university. And people like in my role, running a department or doing professor work, we don't really see the chancellor much. You kind of avoid the chancellor to a certain degree.
Sure.
I heard the previous chancellor say this, and maybe some people who listen can relate. He said being a chancellor at a university, and maybe some people feel like this as a CEO or leader of other organizations, it's like working in a cemetery. There's a lot of people below you. And no one listens. I thought that's pretty good. So I went to the chancellor and I said, I did a little back of the envelope math before I walked in. And I walked in, I said, Chancellor Dearmeyer, I have a 15% chance of writing a book with arguably one of our most successful graduates, especially one in this genre. If you give me what I want, it'll go up to 50%. And if I do what I promise you I'm going to do, it'll go up 2 to 3% every month. He said, well, what do you need? I said, well, I need a research team. I need some funding for travel so I can go out and get these interviews done. I need that support. He's like, you got it. So I walked out the door. I walked out the door thinking, okay, I'm at 50%. Now I've got to do what I need to do. And it wasn't all on me. I had a great team of students that came together, a great graduate student who led the project, and 4 other students who were really deeply involved in this. It was a great experience. But if you add up 2 to 3%, so averaged it to 2.5%, and play it out the number of months it would take, the month we sold the book, it was exactly 100%. Somebody helped me out up there. But I went to the chancellor right then. I said, we hit 100% this month, and we sold the book. And I was like, yeah, so that's, is that betting on myself? I mean, to some degree, yeah, but I was also betting on, I think we can build a great team. Yeah. I think Patterson will be a great partner. I think we can get some really cool interviews in and learn a lot along the way. And it all just kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
Just trying to be a little tenacity sometimes helps.
It does indeed.
But I should say right here, Jessica, that like I'm hitting the highlights of my life and career right now. There are so many lowlights, right? There is so much white space between these wonderful comments that I'm telling you right now where I just learned so much and screwed up so much. So if anybody reads this right now saying like, this dude's got a big ego, I'm not expressing it right because there were plenty of problems.
Sure, there will. Well, that kind of brings us to this idea of disruption, right? And the moments in life that you're thrown a curveball. Let's talk about a little bit about what you've learned. And to your point, this could be, something that happens from a medical perspective. This could be something that happens from a professional perspective, and friendships. I mean, all kinds of things. So what is it that as humans do and don't do in these moments?
I think that, so one thing we figured out as we were going through the process of studying that is you do need to, first of all, to do this well, you have to be clear on what we call your fire inside, but really it's your purpose or where you're trying to go here. And we didn't spend a lot of time in the research or in the writing on it belaboring this point because there's a lot of other great books out there and teachers out there that have talked about getting clear on your purpose. But like knowing what you're good at, that people would actually pay for you to do, that there's a need in the world, what are you passionate about? What can you get excited about? And there's a lot out there, but we ultimately got to the point of saying, okay, disruption's a chance to throw fuel on that fire inside. Not every time. I mean, there's some times where you like something happens, you go, okay, that's interesting. I'm not going to do that. And that's totally fine. In fact, we talk about, when we say disrupt everything, it's a provocative title. And I think a lot of people read it and think it's going to be something it's necessarily not. But what we don't say is disrupt everything doesn't mean blow up everything, change everything. And in fact, we talk about 5 roles that we found from the people we studied that they take on in moments of disruption. And 2 of them are actually going towards stability. 2 of them are actually saying, okay, that's interesting, but I'm not doing that right now. That's interesting that there's a new CRM out there, but we've already had 3 CRMs in the last year. I'm not doing that to my people. I'm saying no.
Right.
We call that a firefighter. You put out that fire. Sometimes people say, you know what, we could go do that and change our business or change our family to be more oriented that direction. But in doing that, we lose the essence of who we are and what we're all about. So I'm going to lead a movement toward saying no. So one part of it is you have, and by the way, and we all know this, but it was reinforced in the research. Sometimes saying no when everybody else is saying yes is the most disruptive thing you can do.
Yeah.
All the other companies are going this way, and we're saying we're not doing that. An example would be when you look at the COVID period, especially when COVID hit, retail stores were scrambling. Like, how are we going to survive this, right? And we know that apps became more, there were more and more apps in the store that you could use to order goods. And they could be delivered to your home, or you could go to the store and they'd come out and drop it in your car. So they created a pickup service. And of course, they were concerned about their own employees at the same time. Are they safe? Then they created these racks inside the stores where you could just come in and sign or something and pick up your item and leave. And some companies kept doubling down on that, moving more and more toward that change to the point where half their store is becoming a warehouse.
Right.
And there were other stores that would say, yeah, that's interesting, but that's not who we are. COVID's going to pass, and we want to be able to get people off the couch to come into our store. So we'll go so far, but we're not going to go all the way. And in those cases, they said no to a disruptive move that the market was doing or their competitors were doing. And that was a very disruptive move to make. So I think that's one thing we learned as we went through it. To your question was that sometimes the most disruptive things you can do is say no and really lean into that. I also think one thing we've uncovered in the project, and sometimes good research says stuff that everybody's like, yeah, I knew that, but thank you for giving me some data to support it. But we talk about these 4 fundamental facts. And I think they're really helpful to keep in mind. The first one is that the status quo is a deceptive little devil.
I know. I love when you talk about that.
If you like things the way they are, enjoy the moment, but they're going to change. But conversely, if you're in a bad situation, if you're dealing with, right, like you mentioned, Patty's recovering from a procedure, it's not the best place to begin, but that too shall pass.
Right.
It's going to pass. So that's the nice part about that. The other side of status quo is the deceptive little devil is maybe you should stop trying to cling to it. I mean, look at what Netflix was able to do. 3-4 different business models. Yeah. If you cling to one of mail order, for example, you would have missed out. No, so the ability to ebb and flow. That's the first one, is the status quo is the deceptive little devil. The second one is that's okay because you're wired for it. And the idea that, Jim Patterson and I are not neuroscientists, although I have access to a lot of them at the university, but we all know to some degree that our brains are pretty cool. And that we have the ability to do things as animals on this planet that no other animals can do. We can envision a different future. We can begin to manifest that. We can regulate our time and our effort and where we put our attention. We have the ability to say no to things. Sometimes difficult, but we can do that. So our brain's really cool. We also are wired because of our experiences. Our experiences inform us. In fact, we're kind of going through my highlights of my career right now, but sometimes, when you're in a low moment or I'm in a low moment, it's kind of good to remind yourself of the highlights in your life, the things you've overcome. And there's people listening right now that have overcome all sorts of obstacles and they think they can't do the next one, but they probably can. And maybe reflecting on that'll help them. And then the third one is that relationships in life provide headwinds and tailwinds. So you have some relationships in life, we all do, that are very supportive to us, very encouraging to us, very challenging to us. Sometimes they tell us the hard truths, but they're helping us move toward that goal in life or that purpose in life or that whatever it is you're working on. And then there's other relationships that are kind of slowing you down. They're headwinds. And one question to figure out is, are there people in my life that are headwinds, that it's going sideways? I know it's not good. In my heart of hearts, I know it's not good, but I haven't been willing to disrupt it. What might I do? So we talk to that. And we also help think, where are you at in people's lives? Are you helping them out or are you holding them back?
Right. A good question.
And maybe there's a text you need to send to someone today.
Yeah.
To kind of change that. So we talk a bit about that in the book as well. And then the fourth one is your time here is finite. Make it count in ways that matter. Listening to this podcast, hopefully you're listening at a 1x speed, but if you're going at 2 speed, that 2, it's going to pass. It's going to pass, and you're going to turn this off and go to your meeting, or you're going to turn this off and go be with your family, or whatever you're going to do. This will pass. This book launch will pass. These things will pass. So make sure you take a moment and ensure that what you're doing really matters. Patterson was good with me on that because I am an achiever by heart. I mean, I am. I like to chase goals and things like that. I can also get a little down on myself sometimes when I feel like it's not moving fast enough. I was actually writing something down this weekend. I was thinking about I have this. I can actually look at my notes. I'll tell you what I wrote. I said,
let me hear.
Yeah, it's not going to, I led up to it. It might not be as profound as I thought it was. I just wrote that.
Sometimes when you go back and read your notes, you're like, oh.
No, I just wrote that I can at times be restless and exhausted from being and the funny thing is you can be restless in life if you feel like you have no purpose. Like I feel like I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. That's a very restless feeling. It can be exhausting. You can also be restless if you have a purpose you're trying to pursue and you don't feel like it's moving fast enough or whatever it might be. And that's exhausting. I felt like sometimes I get restless and exhausted, but Patterson would say to me, hey, Patrick, you're going to drink from 1 of 2 cups today, the cup of joy or the cup of grief. Choose joy. And I think that was such a great thing to help me through this last few years because it writing a book or doing research takes time and you don't even know if there's going to be an end state to it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm a pretty optimistic person and I probably drink from the cup of joy more than the cup of grief. It's just kind of naturally how I'm wired. But for all the research that you all did, and you're looking at these sort of 4 themes, patterns, how often do people actually, I think you would have to teach yourself to do these things, right? Or were you finding that people were organically doing this on their own? Or do you kind of have to stop, think?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I would say that we all to varying degrees would embrace these things, right? The reminders are good. I mean, so we want to keep reminding people and teaching them about these things. What we found was that the people that we studied in the research, what came out from them was not only a recognition of these facts, like they recognize these things, but also they followed a certain pattern every time they got hit with disruption, or at least most times they got hit with disruption. What they would do is, we called it the disruptive loop because you start to realize there's this pattern. And, when you interview a lot of people and code it and you start to realize, okay, there's a pattern here. It's worth writing down. So the first step they would do every time that something happens, so some disruptive thing happened, they wouldn't just react to it. They just hit pause for a moment and they discern. They sit back and say, okay, what does that mean? How's it impacting me? How do I feel about this? And what role of the 5 roles we lay out in the book, what role do I feel like I need to take on right now? Do I need to lead the charge? Do I need to support other people? Do I need to say no to this thing and kill it? Do I need to lead a movement toward change? Or do I need to gather more information? And they all have these fire themes because we're fire inside, right? So do I need to be a trailblazer, a torchbearer, a tinder gatherer, a firefighter, or a fire chief? You don't have to just get the idea of that. So they discern first. And the interesting thing about discernment is we're not saying that these are like personality types, like you're always a firefighter.
Right.
What they are things that they're roles that you take on. You may have a tendency to take on one of these roles, but part of discernment is, should I take that thing on?
Right.
And you have to also, you have to take the time to think about, what role do I feel like I want to take on right now? And what role do I think the situation's calling for me to take on based upon the role I have in the organization or my family or whatever it might be? Recognizing that those two things might be different. You might want to take on one role, but the situation, so how do I reconcile that? So the first step they do is discern. The second step they do is they get really clear on what they're strong at. And we call it behave. So it's discern, behave, achieve, refine. And behave is really about recognizing the behaviors that you're good at, the disruptive behaviors. And there's 16 disruptive behaviors that we uncovered, and 16 is a massively big number, right? If I gave you all 16 behaviors, first you check out at about 8 of them. And second is, if you printed them all out and hung them up in your mirror and be like, today I'm going to do behaviors 3 through 4, you'd massively probably fail. Because it's hard to, that's behavior modification. I'm going to do this today, and there's no heart behind it or whatever. So what we say is there's these 16 behaviors. The cool thing is that when we analyze all these people, there is no pattern that says if you have behavior 1, 3, and 7, you're a slam dunk success. What we found is that some people had 1 and 3, and some people had 7 and 9. And really quickly, their behaviors like casting a vision. Okay, that makes sense. But I need to cast a vision. But the other one is the pair with that one is being willing to look at the brutal reality of what's in your hands right now. Because sometimes you say, I know I want to go to the top of that mountain, but you haven't looked at, where you stand. I'm not going to be an NBA player, folks. That might be my vision, but brutal reality is that's not going to happen. So there's these 16 behaviors. So then it gets really cool to think about, okay, what are my behaviors? How can I bring them to this particular disruption? And who other people might come with me on this one? Because they have different behaviors. So understanding your team, your organization, what their behavioral strengths are. The third one's achieve. And it's really this idea that when I disrupt something, I start by disrupting myself. So I get the doctor's news, and I might choose to change my diet or something like that. By just doing that, by taking that step and starting to change my diet, I start to disrupt the relationships around me. Because other people around me might be like, oh, wow, you're really committed to this thing. You're looking good. I'd like to change my diet. I could learn a little bit too. Or you got this diagnosis. I didn't even know that existed. Let me dig into it. You start to disrupt because we live in a sea of relationships. Right. And we can disrupt them in good or positive, or good or negative ways. And then from there, you might disrupt your team. You might disrupt your family. You might disrupt your organization. You might disrupt your industry. And it isn't like wave that has to happen where you disrupt yourself and then your relationships, then your team, then your organization, then your industry. I think that might be in the classic sense how we looked at things. But one massive disruption called technology doesn't require us to do that anymore. You could be Mark Zuckerberg, and if you ever watch like the Social Network, was it called Social Network? I think so. Yeah, where he goes to a party and kind of gets treated poorly in his mind, goes back to a dorm room and writes this code to Facebook and you know, whatever. But that's kind of going from disrupting yourself to disrupting an industry pretty quickly. Right. Yeah. So that's the idea, is like you can go to different levels, and oftentimes it's really a choice. And then the last step is refine. And it's really about the step that we don't do very well typically, which is pause and go, what did I learn? What am I going to do differently? To capture that, we actually interviewed 2 retired 4-star Army generals, General Stan McChrystal and General David Petraeus. And we asked them, why is it the military, and, certain it could be the military, it could be acting, after a play, you get together and talk about how it went. Why does certain industries or organizations, or why are they really good at stepping back and going, okay, let's review what happened, let's reflect on it, let's kind of discern what we're going to do next, and let's lean into the next right thing to do. And they answered because the stakes are so high in the military. And what we try to help people remember is the stakes are high on your team and in your life too, because that fourth fundamental fact, your time is finite. Right. Make it count in ways that matter. So I would say that that's the 4 steps that people really did consistently. It just kept coming up. And in those, sometimes people would be like, wow, there's a story of a lady who lives in Denmark, and Pia Gavist, and she went to India on a vacation with some friends, and she was struck by the street children in India. Very different than what she'd experienced in Copenhagen. A lot of kids living in India on the streets with no family, looking for next meal. So to her, that was very disruptive, and she started going back to them. In the first loop through the disruptive loop, she just befriended them. But then she leaned in more. What can I do more and more? And now she went through the loop several times. And now she has 1,200 kids in her care in India. And at the same time, she was a server in a cafe. So she didn't have a lot of means. But at the same time, she was able to eventually buy her own cafe. So a really powerful story about the idea of like you can go from having very little to doing a lot.
Yeah, I love that. I want want to talk, because we talk a lot about leadership on this podcast. So I want to talk a little, because, you have some views from your 5-week leadership challenge to now this disruption book. How crucial is getting good at this reflectiveness on disruption, or getting good at disruption itself? How important is that to leadership, do you think?
I think it's really important. I think that sometimes in leadership, we'll react, and then we'll have to backtrack and apologize, or dig in further into the entrenchment, even if we know we're wrong sometimes, right? I know raising kids, when our kids were little, the times where I would be at my wit's end and get upset about something, 9 out of 10 times I was kind of wrong.
Yeah.
I misunderstood something. Then you have to come back and apologize, which is a great example for your kids or a great example for your team. Coming back and apologizing is really critical. But I think that part's really important. But I think discernment to me, it's a really critical thing. It kind of gets really close sometimes to stoicism, but that idea of like kind of putting things in perspective and spending some time thinking about it, but not just on your own, with other people, right? Running an idea I come up with some stupid ideas on my own all the time that aren't worth pursuing at all. And my wife or my colleagues or a co-writer or somebody will be like, yeah, that's interesting, but that doesn't fly. And here's 5 reasons. And that's really, being open to that feedback is really critical too. I just think that leadership so I go to school of leadership that we all are leaders. I think leaders are a choice. It's not a role. It's a choice to be a leader. We lead ourselves first. Then we begin to influence others. We might get a formal role to lead or not. I think that the further you go up the leadership hierarchy, if you will, from leading self to leading a team to leading teams of teams to leading an organization, it gets more and more isolating and lonely. Mm-hmm. Having good voices in your life that you specifically seek out, someone who can speak the truth to you, someone who could challenge you, someone who can encourage you, maybe all the same person, but likely not. You might have to find different voices. That's really critical as well. Yeah. Life is a team sport and a leadership game. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I love that you said leadership is a choice. I believe that too. Like, it's not a role, it's you're choosing, right? And I think the best leaders that I've ever worked with or experienced, just in general, whether it's from advising or I'm in venture now, but the leaders that are great and that stand out are the ones that discern, are the ones that are self-reflective, are the ones that take a step back and say, what did we learn? What do we want to do differently? Kind of to your example of the generals you were speaking with. Is there one, if you're a leader and you're struggling a little bit, is there one thing you can maybe try or do that can really resonate with your team or just get you off on a different trajectory, do you think?
I don't know if there's one thing, but I have a few thoughts on that. One thing I would say is sometimes you get off on the wrong trajectory by some things that you've done, whether you didn't listen to something, or I remember when we had our company, I had offices in a few different states, and there were a lot of times where I would fly early in the morning to one of our locations, and I would be there when they're coming in for work. I've already flown there, landed, had something to eat. I'm in the office. And along that way, like on that plane, I'm thinking about stuff. I'm like, oh, we're going to do this and this. I dream up all these wonderful things. And I get to the office and I just start pronouncing these things as if everybody already bought into them and know what they meant. It was a little bit, I envision it a little bit like we're all on the dock and I've jumped into the lake and I'm just swimming and they're all looking at each other like, why did he jump in the water? What's going on?
What's happening?
So, I mean, sometimes we do that to ourselves. And if that, if you find you've gotten sideways with your people for whatever reason, the chance to just kind of come in and say, hey, this didn't go too well. Let's talk about it a little bit. I want to learn from it. I want to get better, and genuinely want to do that. And I find that it's interesting when a leader comes to their team and says, I kind of messed this up, or we're off target, or I don't know how to get from here to there. It's amazing how often your team's rooting for you. They want to see you get there because you're winning as they're winning. Right. And they're also just human beings. We're all human beings. So being a little bit vulnerable in that moment, which is a word used a lot, I know, but I think it's really appropriate in that situation to be like, I don't know how to tackle this, or I really messed this thing up. I think that's a really critical thing as a leader to do, to own it. I also think it's really critical to think about why are you doing this in the first place. Mm-hmm. We talk about leader, you're going to get promoted, and that's a natural thing in your career, and you get to take the next step, and you get a little bump in your paycheck, and maybe a better parking spot if you even go to work these days physically. These type of things, or a better spot in the Zoom room. But leadership's hard, and as much of it as it is an honor, it's hard. I remember as a young guy, checking soldiers' feet. right, to make sure there's not a lot of blisters on them. You have to go down the line and check. You have to be willing to do that. You have to want to do that. You have to, when I was in the airborne units, leaders jump first. And Simon Sinek says leaders eat last, which is a true statement, but they also jump first, which means when we jump out of airplanes, we're the first one to go. It's a very role model-y type of situation. And I was talking to, some people may know Patrick Lencioni. I was talking to Pat Lencioni about this, and he wrote Motivation, among many other things. We were just talking about like, what's your motivation? Why do you want to do this? And I think it's really critical, especially in the hard times, to connect. I think there's people that take a role of a leader, get into the role, not realize what it's all going to necessarily entail. It's not just the IQ, it's the EQ side of it. And they're probably struggling to say, okay, what the heck do I do next? And there was a study that was released years ago, and Harvard Business Review talked about it, where they said that the average age of someone getting their first formal leadership role is 32 years old. The average age of getting their 30 years old. The average age is 30 years old, and the average age of getting their first formal leadership training is 42 years old. So that's a 12-year gap where you're learning how to do something. Yeah, you're learning how to do something where maybe your role model before you was great or maybe not so much great. And now you're trying to figure your way out, and you're doing it on the backs of your people. So I think it's really critical as well for leaders to be learners. I mean, you have to be constantly in this, whether it's learning the work better, because how can you tell people what good looks like if you don't know? Yeah. Learning about your people more, because they're not just, names on a list or numbers in a system. They're people with hearts and brains, and they want to do cool things too. And then learning yourself and learning what's going out there is really critical. Out there is really critical.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything that you said. And I think I became a much better leader when I realized it had nothing to do with me. I'm like, this isn't about me. This is about them. And that sort of realization changed me, right? And changed how I communicated with them, how I led, the choices that I made. But I don't know, all the things that you were saying just gave me like goosebumps.
Well, I like to look at it, Jessica, as like, I know my story and I'm writing my story. I get this cool opportunity to help them write their story. And I think every day we do that a little bit. Like some days are like you sit down and write a full paragraph in your story. Other days you might just dot an I or cross a T, for those of you who actually write anymore. Or tap a key. How's that?
I know my handwriting is so bad now.
I know mine is like, well, I'm usually all caps, so I look like an 80-year-old man screaming at someone on my sheet of paper. But if I start to write in cursive, which is kind of, not the thing anymore, it gets pretty tragic, and only I can decipher it. And it's I heard that doctors, have bad handwriting, but I think they meant medical doctors. Now, you don't want me coming to you for an emergency on a plane. I'll be like, if they say, is there a doctor on a plane? I'm like, yes, fill out this survey. Not the right guy for that.
Not the right guy.
No.
Well, listen, we are running out of time. So I'm going to do two things. One, we always ask for a nugget of advice, the best advice that you have to give to our listeners today. And then we'll go into career confession. So what is the advice you want to leave us with today?
Yeah, I think that advice, and this is, I'm cold on this one, so I'm thinking about it for a second. I think that the advice that I want to leave folks is that regardless of whatever it is you're facing, whatever opportunities in front of you, or whatever challenge you see in front of you, the ability to kind of own the moment you're in right now and not let the whole thing overwhelm you. Look for a way to take just one bite at a time. And one way we talk about in the book we wrote, we ended up having these disruptive moves. And these are like little things that you can do. We were on Squawk Box the other day. Jim and I were with CNBC. We started talking about the guys in the it was on Varney and Company. The interviewer was like, "Oh, that's way up in the clouds." We're like, "No, that's way down in the ground." Owning the day, like the idea. One thing I've tried to really practice this recently. It's one of the 27 moves is own the day. So before I get out of bed every morning now, instead of like immediately looking at my device for a while and then absentmindedly kind of wandering off to the restroom or something, what I do is I actually sit and say, okay, what role do I need to fill today? Or how does today connect to my purpose? And I think about those things before my feet even hit the ground. And it just starts you on a different trajectory from the moment go. For some people, that includes like opening up their Bible or studying some scripture. For other people, it might be a quick conversation with their partner. For me, it's a little bit of those things for sure, but it's also saying like, here's what I'm going to do today and here's how I'm going to help somebody else along the way. And just, I think that's really key.
When I wake up tomorrow, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, own the day.
I'm going to own the day. I love that. Oh my gosh, I got goosebumps again. Okay, we're going to do career confessions. So here's a little context for the question.
And these are cold as well, folks. So my answer,
Yes.
we'll see what we say.
Oh, I have a feeling you'll be fine. It keeps changing faster than I can adapt. My team's exhausted and I'm trying to hold it together. So here's the question. How do you keep leading when disruption stops feeling like an opportunity and starts feeling like survival?
Yeah. So, there's a school of thought out there that says every challenge is an opportunity to learn, grow, and develop, or every problem is an opportunity to learn, grow, and develop. And I don't fully subscribe to that school of thought. Sometimes problems are problems. I don't want to grow. I don't want to learn. I don't want to develop. I just want to deal with this issue, hopefully never see it again and move on. And I think part of it is sorting through that. Sometimes it's just a problem. We need to take care of it and just be done with that thing. Yeah. But there's a lot of things that come up that are opportunities mixed into that. I would say the majority, really.
Yeah.
So in those moments, it can feel overwhelming. It sounds like the person who wrote that has, just a lot of things going on. And I would say maybe one thing you need to do is just step back and take a moment to unpack a little bit. Sometimes, if you're going on a hike and you keep putting stuff in your bag, eventually it really does start to weigh you down and not serve you well. So I think this might be a chance with this person or this person on their own, or maybe with their team, is to unpack all the stuff we're doing right now.
Right.
And figure out, is some of the stuff just need to not continue to go on the journey with us? Because sometimes in organizations, like you worked in human resources, right? Anything that involved a person somehow was an HR issue to solve, right? So everything comes to you. And at some point you have to sort it out and go, well, this really isn't our stuff. This is operations stuff, or this is marketing stuff, or whatever. This is our house. So maybe sometimes as a team, when you start to feel that way, it's unpacking, what are we doing? What's ours to take care of and what's not? And maybe help some things find their right places. And then also just get really clear on a team, like, who do we want to be? Where do we want to go? What's our contribution to the organization? Who do we serve? And as these other disruptions come along, we pour it through that filter. And if this thing doesn't have to do anything, it doesn't advance what we do or what we're trying to do or who we're trying to help, maybe it's just a nice one to say no to, which is disruptive, yes, because it's hard to say no and it might upset some people.
Yeah.
But you got to keep the main thing the main thing.
No, I love that. And, at Netflix, we'd always say the hardest thing in strategy was what not to do.
Strategy is a choice. I taught strategy for 11 years and tried to do it a lot on my own with clients and in my own business. Strategy at its simplest form, it's a choice, A or B, which path are we going to take? And one of the most deadly routes you can take as a business or as a team is to try to straddle, where you say, we're going to be A and B, because you end up being neither. Well, you burn up resources, you burn out people, and nobody really knows where the heck they're going. And what they'll do is the days that it's easier to choose A, they'll choose A. And the days it's easier to choose B, they'll choose B. And they'll do neither with excellence.
Yeah, no, and I think your advice is great to kind of take a step back and unpack. I remember this time with my team, and all of the folks that worked for me at this time, they always tell this story. And I think it was like one of the moments where they loved and hated me at the same time. But we were stressed out. We had a lot of work. The company was in sort of a pivotal moment. We were making the transition from DVD to streaming, and my team was overworked. They were exhausted. And I brought them all in a room and I played at the loudest I could play on the speakers that I had, the Kelly Clarkson song, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger. And I do think that there's a little bit of that too. It's like, this is hard. Like, sometimes the work that you're doing, even though it's exhausting and it seems like it's overwhelming, unpack it, figure out, if it has a purpose, to your point, and if it's part of the mission. And if it is, sometimes it's just hard, right?
Yeah, if you decide, because it doesn't just end at that point, right? Oh, we're going to make the choice and it'll be easy. No, it's going to be really hard. But what you'd want to do is if that's the thing you've committed to and you're going to do as a team, then just keep doubling down on that thing. Don't start looking over your shoulder. Yeah. There's this great quote that I'll completely destroy, but it basically is like Cyrus the Great said this, but essentially what it's saying is that I want diversity in counsel and unity in command, which is the idea of like, hey, let's get in the room as a team, diversity. I want lots of different voices. I want to hear from everybody. I want everybody's input, and then we're going to decide. And once we decide, we're going to unify on that thing. One of the worst things that can undermine trying to do something is when the team walks out of the room and the conversation happens after the meeting. The meeting after the meeting, right, where they go, "This isn't going to work," or "That's not going to work," or "I've seen this before, it's going to fail." and you feel as a leader, gosh, we're going to ready to tackle this big project or this big initiative, and you realize that the ground beneath you is already starting to crumble.
Yeah.
So really encourage people to share in meetings like that or in open forums. And it's hard sometimes because you're the leader and they want to sometimes say what you think they want to say. Make it easy for them.
Right.
Invite it, praise it. Jack Welch, whether you like Jack Welch or not. I mean, people are like, if you know anything about Jack Welch's leadership, results-wise, it's pretty impressive. I mean, very impressive.
Yes.
The way he went about it, people there's no gray area. You either like him or you don't like him, right? But one thing Jack Welch said, which has stuck with me, is that when you see people doing what you want them to do, make them 10 feet tall and let everybody see it. Like, make a big deal out of it. And I agree. Organizations oftentimes talk about values. We value X, Y, and Z. We've all seen the signs, right? The CEO will spin in their chair and show you it on the wall. It'll say integrity, loyalty, trust, collaboration, communication, and have fun doing all these things or something like this. What's written on the wall. And that's great. And I'm glad they did that work. But what's that look like in practice? Right. And I think that's what you as a team, in a team leader role, need to think about. Like, what does integrity look like in action here? And how can I model that for my team members? I think is really critical as well. So I think that when you feel overwhelmed by all these things coming at you, one of the best things you can do is, as Stephen Covey would say, you're getting caught up in the thick of thin things. Yeah. And you've got to step back and remember what the important stuff is. And then once you decide, you got to just come up with a plan and follow it and be candid with each other and catch people doing things right. And, be willing to do your part, which might include rolling up your sleeves at time, but at the other time, recognizing that everybody has a role and your job is to kind of direct. I like the idea that as a leader, you have a couple different hats you wear. Sometimes you're the dreamer, sometimes you're the director, and sometimes you're the doer. And you have to figure out how to use those different roles.
I love that. And I think too, when I look back at these times at work that were incredibly tough and incredibly challenging, they're the best times I had.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, but I mean, and then I look at the people that I was doing it with, and some of those relationships are the best relationships I have in my life today, because the bond and the journey we went through together was unlike nobody's ever had, It's you can't recreate that kind of thing.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
I remember my mom passed away back in 2011, and that was right around the time I'd just been out of the country for a while, and we were getting ready to sell the business. There was a lot kind of going on at that point. And she passed away up in Chicago, and I went up to Chicago for the funeral and everything. And when I came out of the funeral, I was standing on these few steps outside the church, and there were people gathered around outside. And I look over, and there's one of my employees who, on his own dime, on his own time, flew out from DC to be at that funeral. And that's cooler than any project we ever did, any number we ever hit. The fact that somebody would do that for me is pretty cool. And my hope was that he did it for me because he saw me doing it for others, I hope. Right.
Well, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
So
I just got goosebumps again.
Yeah, those are moments that stick in your mind, right? I mean, where it's like, this is why I didn't do it so that somebody would come to my mom's funeral. Right. But him doing that was such an expression of something. That's that's the gift of leadership. It's
so true. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you for 2 more hours, but I know
I don't know if anybody would be listening, but
I know. Well, we're not Joe Rogan, I guess.
Yeah, but, we're getting close.
I guess. But anyways, thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time, and I hope you'll come back. And I hope everyone gets your book. And where can they find you if they want to learn more about you? I'm guessing they can buy the book everywhere books are sold.
Yeah, it is literally
find you.
Yeah, it is literally everywhere books are sold. It's kind of fun, to walk in and see it. Although I tell you this, I went to a Barnes and Noble the other day, and I said, "Oh, I wrote a book. It's over here." And they're like really helpful. Bring all the books up. You sign them. They put stickers on them. Take photos. Hey, here's our tag on Instagram. Blah 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 blah. And it's like it's a writer. It's like exciting to go through that, right?
Of course,
because usually you're digging away at something for 3 years. Then I went to I was in an airport. And I went into a store, and it's if you guess whatever store it is, you're wrong. It was a one of a kind type of store. And I walk in, and I see the book on the shelves, and I pick one up, and I walk up to the lady who's working there. I said, I wrote this book, and she said, "Did you bring that in here or what?" Like, kind of had her arms crossed, looked me up and down, and I'm like, I guess she thought I was trying to bring my book in and get them to sell it. And I said, no, it's over there on the shelf. I said, "Would you like me to sign them? I'm happy to do that." And she looked at me, and she goes, "No, we're good." And I'm like, "All right." I said, "All right. Well, thanks. I gave it a shot. Have a good day." And I hope you sell lots of them. And I feel like a dope and I'll go get my Starbucks. But yeah, that was it's, so, it's good to have the ups and downs in life, but
it is.
No, as far as where they can find me, it's pretty easy. My name's Patrick Leddin. I'm sure it's in the notes for this, and this website's patrickleddin.com. My co-author, James Patterson, is the world's bestseller. Find him anywhere, but he's at jamespatterson.com. And then we actually have a partnership with the company Franklin Covey, because Patterson and I were talking about how do we really scale this thing, not to sell more books, really, to say, like, how do we get this ideas in more hands? And we picked the company Franklin Covey. Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People years ago, and they're a consulting and development firm that deals with millions of leaders around the world. And they had a course called Disrupt Everything, Innovate for Impact that launches on November 17th of 2025. So it's out there, and people can bring it into their organization, into their teams, and their organizations to help people realize, here's what we found. People listening to this who are in senior roles in organizations know there's lots of disruptions going on, and many of them know where they want to take the business. In fact, many of them are thinking, if we don't do this, we'll be gone in 10 years. So they're thinking like this idea of like, I got to go this way. But then they look over and they say, do I have the leaders and the culture to get me there? What we're trying to do is help them get the leaders and culture by teaching every leader in the team how to deal with disruption, how to create their own little visions, not little, and I don't mean that in a diminutive perspective, but organizationally smaller visions. How can they deal with obstacles, and how can they rapidly try things and get better? So that kind of rapid Silicon Valley type of approach in that regard to help them do things really cool and reframe disruption in their minds is it's not necessarily negative or positive. It is, and they have to choose.
It just is. Yes, it
so
just is.
Go to franklincovey.com and you can find out all about that.
Okay, buy the book, go to franklincovey.com, and thank you, Patrick.
That poor writer who wrote that question and sorry, like I had 50 things to do, you just gave me 3 more. Thanks a lot for nothing.
Give some good advice. Like, to your point, they don't have to take it all.
That's right. It's your
All
choice.
Right, thank
folks.
you. Yeah, it's your choice. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to TruthWorks.